right, welcome everyone to the Chicago Football Connection podcast. I'm your host, Steve Letizia. You can follow me on Twitter at CFCBears, joined by my co-host, as always, Luke O'Grady. Follow him on Twitter at Luke O'Grady. And we have a guest today. We don't do a lot of guests on the show, but we thought with training camp starting and a lot of things moving around, we'd have one of the best Bears followers on Twitter, best football followers on Twitter, Brad Spielberger. Follow him on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Brad, thanks so much for jumping on. We're really happy to have you. How you doing? How you feeling coming into training camp?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for having me on. You know, I'm feeling good. We'll get into it. You definitely can't feel worse than last year. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. It felt like today was like the first like big day of dominoes falling for like the big like long like kind of drought from the draft. Like we had Trevon Diggs sign, we had Barkley being the first domino in that running back situation. Justin Fields ranked 86 on the NFL top 100 ahead of Trevor Lawrence. What do we think about that, boys?
Brad, I'll let you take that one. Yeah, that is the big news of the day. Justin Fields, 86. A little higher than I think most people thought, but excited to have a Bears quarterback on the top 100. So what are your thoughts on that? Just curious.
That's probably a first. I don't know how long they've been doing that list, but I would imagine that's a first for that. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I mean, obviously there is a component of, he had incredible plays last year. Second most rushing yards all time for a quarterback. Yeah. We know there's areas he can improve, but it is cool to see recognition from his his peers across the NFL. Yeah. That sounds meaningful, right? I mean, they obviously know football. They play NFL football. And I think it shows they also, they think he's going to continue to get better and maybe really earn that status and hopefully, rank even higher next year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's very rare that the public opinion of someone is higher than like mine on the Bears. Like I'm usually the homer for it. And like me and Steve were saying before he jumped on, it's like, listen, I love him and I really believe he can be the guy. But even then, like this felt like more of a projection of what he could be. But like you said, like those are the guys that have played against him. Like it was cool hearing Fred Warner say it. It was cool hearing Roquan Smith say it. And I think we would all agree that like this, it looks like it's shaping up to be a year where he could take that step. I feel like I see him compared a lot to like the Jalen Hurts progression. So if this year was like his Jalen Hurts year where, instead of winning 3 games like we did last year or whatever, if we win 7 or 8 games, 9 games, push towards the playoffs and he takes that leap forward, like that would be a successful Justin Fields year for me.
No doubt about it. And I think it's important to remember, too, like, Hurts was obviously good, but you remember that playoff game against Tampa Bay pretty much could do nothing. Like, it's, growth takes time. It's not linear. It's a slow burn. But hopefully, eventually it spikes. And so 7, 8, 9 wins and a good field season, I'd take that 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And I think that's what we've been talking about a lot is viewing this year as more of a building block year than – the Bears are going to win 11 games and make the playoffs. Like, probably not. If they get that 7, 8, 9 wins and Fields puts together a strong season, that's a very successful season in my book, even if they do miss the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems like the last couple of years, too, with Poles' like free agents, like his philosophy around it, he really isn't willing to throw money at a position just because he needs it. And because of that, like, I think no one would argue that maybe the defense is going to go into this year without all of the resources that you think maybe could make it competitive, and maybe that's fine. I think it's nice for once to have a GM that's willing to keep some money in the bank as opposed to paying for a position of need. But with that, I think you're probably asking the Bears offense to carry the team this year. And if they do have a good offense, maybe that would be like something like a 7, 8, 9 win team. But I wouldn't be surprised. I think we were the worst defense in football last year, and there's probably a good chance we're floating around the same thing this year. So if Fields takes that step we want, that kind of 8 to 9 win range would be awesome for us.
I feel like as Bears fans, like Big 12 football, like if we just lose a bunch of games like 42-35, that's cool with me, right?
Yeah. It's better than losing games 13-10, so I'll take it.
We were just talking about the home opener against the Packers in 2019. I was at that game, and that was about as sour of a game as you could go to. No team played good, and we still lost, and it was Aaron Rodgers at the helm. But there was those games last year, like the Dolphins game, the Cowboys game, those games where Fields and company looked good on offense, but, we weren't able to put it all together. If those are what the losses look like this year, I think it'll be pretty encouraging. I don't think that there's any, like, at least from the Bears fans that are in the know, I don't think there's any misconceptions about us being a team that's really going to challenge for anything. But I think that there's an outside chance that the team's good enough for us to make the playoffs. And that's, a situation where anything can happen when you make the playoffs. But if the offense looks good and you can rattle together a couple of wins, from some of the easier games in the season. I think that would be a success.
100%. And there are some easy games on the schedule, so the opportunity is out there.
Yeah, and there's still room to kind of improve this team. One of the things I kind of wanted to talk to you about, we heard about all off season about how the Bears have so much money to spend, and we not only have so much money to spend, but we have to hit a cap floor. And the Bears didn't really do that in free agency. They still have a lot of money. If I'm not mistaken, they still have to spend money to reach the cap floor. Is that the case?
About $25 million still in 2023 cash to hit that floor. Yep.
Okay. So, and it's probably not, you're not signing for a guy for $25 million right now on free agency. Yeah. So how do they get there? Are you hearing anything about Kmet extension, Mooney extensions? How are they going to get to that cap floor? And what happens if they don't get to that cap floor?
Yeah, so I do think they are going to still add a player. I know Ryan Poles got asked today at his press conference, are you talking to edge rushers? I think was the specific question, which of course makes sense. I think they will. I think they're going to sign someone. I don't know who it's going to be. You always hear about Yannick Ngakoue because of his connections to, I guess he didn't actually play for Eberflus, but, a good, sub 30-year-old edge rusher still out there. A designated pass rusher type that can't really defend the run, but I think they have a lot of guys that can defend the run on early downs, like DeMarcus Walker, Rasheem Green. Those guys kick inside, and you let Yannick just kind of tee off on passing down. So, just one name. There's obviously, your Melvin Ingrams, your Justin Houstons. Maybe you do try to trade for a guy like a Bryce Huff or a Derek Barnett or a player on a team that has 6-7 good edge rushers, about 6-7 guys that would be the number one edge on the Bears potentially. So I think that is the start. And then I think for extensions, I still kind of think Mooney and Kmet are the most likely. Jaylon Johnson's very interesting. He's obviously currently going through an agency change right now, which sometimes suggests you're trying to get a deal done and being proactive there. I just think it's tough. This regime didn't see a ton of healthy Jaylon Johnson last year. Obviously had some injuries coming out of college and in his rookie season. He's no doubt a very good football player. I think has the potential to be a number one outside corner for a lot of teams, but I think the big thing for me is Mooney not on PUP, ankle ready to go, going into training camp. I think if he looks good the first couple of days, I think those talks start to ramp up a little bit here in the next couple of days.
If, let's say, theoretically, the extensions that get done are Kmet and Mooney, with like I know you probably have some expectation of what those contracts would look like. Let's say that those both get done tomorrow. Do you know how much roughly that would take off the 2023 numbers? Like how many millions we'd knock off that floor?
Yeah, so obviously, because it's just cash, nothing to do with cap here. I know you use the salary cap to get the number, and it gets kind of convoluted. But basically, it would come down to structure, right? So what the Bears could do is they could either give a big signing bonus or just give that big first-year salary that all hits in 2023. Realistically, though, I think if you extend those two guys, you're getting pretty close to $25 million in added cash flow in 2023 between just the two of them, right? Even if you say, and maybe this is a follow-up, let's say, I don't know, Kmet gets $13.5 million a year. Pause for gasps. And Darnell, and Darnell Mooney gets, I don't know, 17, something like that. Those are kind of just numbers I'm throwing out. I haven't heard any specifics for either guy, but let's say that happens. I think you're spending $25 million just in 2023 from signing bonuses and increased salaries pretty much alone.
Do you think that the Trevon Diggs signing today, do you think that's going to carry some weight as to what the Jaylon Johnson will be looking for? Now, I know that I think you guys would agree, style-wise, they're very, very different players. I think they couldn't be polar opposites as far as corners go. Like a good day for Jaylon Johnson, you don't really hear his name, and you're always saying Trevon Diggs' name from any given play kind of thing. But he just went for $20 million, and I know that Robert Schmitz that did a lot of good work about how that drop off from the top to like the kind of mid-tier cornerback market looks. Like maybe a mid-tier corner takes like anywhere from 13 to 14, but the top tiers are getting that $20 million. Do you think that Trevon Diggs, being that he gets as many interceptions as he does, but there's always that, hey, he gives up X amount of yards thing. Do you think that Jaylon Johnson's looking at as like a structure for a deal he would be looking for? Or do you think that he probably has some people in his room saying, maybe we're not in that $20 million range?
Yeah, definitely stylistically very different players. I do think at a certain point with contracts, the teams get away from that a little bit. Obviously, you're using stats, you're using, how you're deployed in the defense, how you fit, et cetera, to a degree. But ignoring that, with all due respect, Jaylon Johnson is not in that category. Even if you want to say just for health wise, even if maybe if he did play 1,000 snaps a year, we could make the case he is. But I think he falls in that, Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, a couple of years ago now, but like William Jackson, Shaq Griffin, 13 to 15 million per year range, right in that, number two corner, the second tier, of cornerback pay. And I think, it's an early extension, so there is some projection in there. Maybe he then pushes for a 3-year deal, a shorter term contract to get back to the market. But I struggle to see them getting up into that, 19, 20, conversation.
Yeah.
So do you think that there's no chance, well, maybe not no chance, but unlikely to get that done before the season? It looks like that he's going to be probably testing the free agent market. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
It's interesting. So I do think this regime is going to be open to in-season extensions. Not that prior ones weren't. Some clubs, they basically say, as soon as week 1 starts, we're done. We're not talking until after the year. Yeah, the Bears, have not been that way. And I think Ryan Poles, maybe he's even said at a press conference, like, we're comfortable going into the season, talking with agents a little bit. And so I really do think, like, if Jaylon Johnson has a first awesome 8 weeks of the season, stays healthy, plays well, fits in Flus's defense, all these things, gets a little bit of boost from, I know it's still not a great unit, but a better defensive line, maybe that helps him out a little bit. I would be surprised if they come back to the table and say, hey, we don't want you to hit free agency. We don't want to franchise tag you. Let's try to work through something. And maybe then it's more like 16, 17 as opposed to, 14, 15. I think it's entirely on the table with Jaylon Johnson.
Yeah, and to that point, too, there's a chance that you can get into the season and you're 5 or 6 weeks in and you like what you're seeing from Jaylon Johnson, but maybe, you're getting those rookie struggles from Tyreek Stevenson. Maybe Kyler Gordon doesn't really take that step that you're looking for. And then you look at that group and think, man, if we don't have a Jaylon Johnson in that group, this looks a lot different. It looks a lot more convoluted. And it could be something where they go, okay, maybe we do try and lock him down just so that, the top level of that group looks different. And to your point, I think someone like a Jamel Dean, man, like, he was someone that if in a vacuum, I would have thought would have probably fetched more money than Jaylon Johnson just from a year in, year out performance. It's a really, really hard position to be steady year over year, and Jamel Dean can do that. And him coming in and signing what he did, do you think that made it harder for a couple of like cornerbacks kind of in like Jaylon Johnson's position?
10%. So he does have like the ACL tear and some stuff going on there as well that I think maybe was a bit of a factor. That was in college, I think, before his NFL career, but obviously, still relevant. But yeah, I do. I think there are definitely going to be teams that can now point to that deal and say, hey, we think you're a very good football player. We also thought Jamel Dean was a very good football player. He stayed with his original franchise, who is probably going to stink this year. They already paid Carlton Davis. They paid a lot of players, frankly, and he's still stuck around. Those deals, I'm not blaming him or saying it was a bad move or anything. That was maybe what he wanted to do, take a little bit less money to stay where he was. But yeah, teams every single time are going to weaponize that and say, point to it. Hey, this guy signed this. Why would you get a lot more than that? We don't see it.
Sure, that makes complete sense. And kind of on the other side of that, we've kind of talked about it from the player's point of view. I'm curious, from the front office point of view, but more specifically, you're a guy you're tuned into the Bears, obviously, but you're also tuned into other front offices. So one of the questions I really wanted to kind of get into was how Ryan Pace is viewed, by other front offices. And I know I've heard you on podcasts talked about before. There's been articles written, but I want to just hear it from you. How, do other GMs view Ryan Pace as a guy a good GM, middle of the road GM? What are you hearing? It's kind of what
we got to make fun of you. Luke and I are laughing at you. You did the double Ryan Pace, which we all do. That is
Ryan Pace.
Literally in my notes, I have Ryan Pace listed too. So can't believe
trust me, I think every single person who talks about the Bears has probably done that this offseason. But yeah, so very interesting. And I have actually kind of bugged, some contacts around the league or even just talked to people at the Combine and Senior Bowl and things like that. And look, it's been it's gone both directions. I think there's been some great moves. People talk about the Chase Claypool trade, maybe in certain lights, but I think the biggest thing is I think it's very, very clear he has a plan. He has an idea of what he wants to do. You hear a lot of these cliches and buzzwords from guys that come in. We want to get younger, faster, physical. We want to draft and develop. There is no evidence that that's not exactly what he's currently trying to execute, right? And trying to get players that fit Eberflus's system, but at the same time, you're not like the guy you mentioned. You're not paying whatever price a guy wants. Like, I think they probably would have loved to sign a Mike McGlinchey, a Draymond Jones, an insert name here. And I think the price just got to a point where they were saying that the value is simply not there for this player. And so as much as we want to maybe address these position groups, we're not going to do it. So I think all those things, are viewed in a positive light. I think the trade for Bryce, or, the Bryce Young trade, I think also people thought, hey, this is a guy being proactive, being aggressive because he wants to, again, have a cohesive plan where free agency and the draft are combined and everything is in unison. And to a degree, you can't do that if you don't know how your draft is going to shake out, especially if you're picking first overall or ninth overall, right? It's a little bit different if you were going to go from, 14 to 18, whatever. But so I think that's the biggest thing is like, it's very hard the first couple of years. Go look at your favorite GM of all time. Go look at his first draft class. It probably sucks. Like it's hard to do. I'm telling you, like John Schneider, like it's a long list of bad draft classes, and they settle down, they settle in, They kind of get a feel for everything they're doing. The last point I would make is just in my opinion, and this sounds kind of simplified, but the best GMs sometimes are simply guys that are just in on everything. They don't get everything done, but they are like, Howie Roseman, there's not a single report where it's like the Eagles were sniffing around. The Eagles checked in on the price. They saw what was going on here. And, you basically, salary dump trade Roquan and Robert Quinn. I think the Robert Quinn, especially, you basically just bought a fourth round pick for nothing, which I think was exceptional. Roquan, people can nitpick on, is he better than Tremaine Edmunds, etc. But he's just, I think, so active and constantly trying to improve this football team, not in the offseason, at every single second of every single day. I think he is a very, very good, as far as we know so far, GM. We'll see how it works out, but the process for me is very, very sound. We'll see about the results, but the process is there.
Yeah, and that's honestly when it comes to like GMs, like that has been what's been like kind of, for me at least, coming from a Ryan Pace regime to a Ryan Poles regime, is the process has been very like, I don't know if impressive is the right word, but it's been reassuring what his process has been. Like when he talks about the draft and he talks about, we want to have 10 picks in the draft each time. Like that's a process that I can agree with. That the draft is a crapshoot and the numbers are more important than the players themselves, which is so far gone from what Pace was doing. And then like his frugality when it comes to the free agency. Like I know that you could argue, hey, why didn't you throw $15 million at Jamel Dean? But by the same merit, it's like he's made it clear what he looks for in free agency. He wants young athletic talent. He doesn't want to overpay for it. And whether or not you agree about the hits that he's made, I think the processes are good. And even to that point, something like the Claypool trade, so far it looks like that was the wrong decision. But his ability to say, hey, like I might have got that wrong, and I still need to target a wide receiver one in the Carolina trade was really reassuring.
100%. Yep. And just real quick, the draft stuff, you guys both, I think, know me as well enough at this point. Obviously, the trading down is, that's a man after my own heart, trading down and stockpiling draft capital. And it may have landed you your starting left tackle for the next decade, in your first draft. So it's just, I think he gets it.
Yeah. Yeah. To the point of, we were saying a little bit earlier, we were talking about how like the Jamel Dean affected the rest of the market. We had a bit of a domino fall in the running back market today. And I think that was something that we wanted to talk to you about because it's been big in the last couple of days. The running backs had their big Zoom call with all of those guys that kind of had those contracts coming up soon. And then today we had Barkley kind of be the first person to take a shot across the bow. He signed for what a lot of people are talking about was pretty weird. I remember seeing a stat that this was the first time a single year contract was signed above what the franchise tag number would be since like Edge James, like maybe a decade ago, which, funny enough, was another running back position. How do you think that the Saquon Barkley deal today shapes what we can expect to come for the running backs? Or do you think it's changed anything you can expect?
I think it makes it even more difficult, frankly. No, I really do, because he got an additional $900,000 in incentives that are tied to massive statistical categories that are hard to attain no matter what. And he has to make the playoffs for any of those incentives to hit. So, for me, it's like we talk about the Zoom call and all those things. And again, look, every player makes their own decision. Like he wants to be in New York. He's dealt with the injuries. By all accounts, he's the most likable guy on the planet. And he seems that way, everywhere he goes. But he didn't do his position group any favors. That is an objective opinion, I think. Because it just shows that you can kind of play hardball to a degree. He was on a podcast saying he could threaten to hold out and skip week 1, and 2 days later he basically got Yeah, he got some upfront cash. What he actually got was the signing bonus, which was $2 million, which,
Right.
$2 million is $2 million. But always good to have some cash in your bank account. You can invest or do whatever you want with it. But yeah, it's just such a grind right now. And I'm also not saying he should have missed time. There's no, Josh Jacobs should not miss a game. You should not be forfeiting game checks here. But it just is another notch in the cap for these front offices. They just know they have every single last bit of leverage in these conversations. We just have more evidence of that truth today.
So you mentioned that you don't think they should be holding out, which I agree with, but what can they do? Like, what can the running backs do to fix this? I mean, like, obviously the GMs aren't going to change what they're doing. They have all the leverage. So what can if they can't hold out, which is what you usually do in a contract dispute, what can the running backs do to change this? Or is it just kind of, this is what it is?
And let me add on to that too, being that the running back, especially 30 years before now, was like probably the most important position in football, or like, viewed in a totally different light than it is now. How do you think we got here? And do you think that there's any recourse that could get us to a place where the running backs feel a little bit more appreciated? Because I know that a big nature of the issue is how good they are when they come out. Do you think that there's something that could be changed to like maybe address it specifically at the running back position?
Yeah, so the specifically the running back position is tough because you're hearing a lot of, all right, shorten the rookie deals just for running backs. If you do that, then teams are just not going to draft them early because it's basically a disadvantage. I think even if you shorten the rookie contract to where you can get extended after 2 years for everyone, that still does benefit running backs. It's not about, in every case, it's not about a team saying, I mean, to some degree it is, but this deal or that deal. It's more so just that, like you mentioned, the peak years of a running back is frankly like your sophomore year in college through your third NFL season is basically, we joke, but that's kind of true, right?
No,
so
it's for sure.
Yeah. So, and then to the second point, so that, I guess that is, potentially one solution, but a couple others, one I think is with franchise tag specifically, and yes, this is a smaller pool of players, but there is language about good faith negotiations with not only with every contract, but also I think there's a specific provision in Article 10 with the franchise tag guys. It's very vague. It's kind of impossible to actually enforce. I think you would say maybe a team's initial offer has to have 2 franchise tags worth of fully guaranteed money, which is basically how a lot of conversations start anyways. But for the running backs, teams are basically offering less than that. I know there was a report that Barkley, like one of the last offers he got, had the $22.2 million in fully guaranteed money. Why would he take a deal where the full guaranteed money is 2 franchise tags when you can just get 2 franchise tags? So all that, but my answer to what you can do, I think you have to get extremely creative. And it's not even the running backs. I think it's like a couple random ideas that throw out there. But one, I've seen a couple people talk about, I come up with like a pool of money tied to performance and statistics and stuff like that. I like the idea in principle, but if they say, all right, if you get 350 touches, then you're eligible, teams are going to give them 349 touches. So that kind of, gives me pause. Yep. I think here's what I think. NIL is massive. And I think, and I'm not, the college comment was like a half joke, half reality. Secondly, though, I think you need to legitimately consider like, okay, the most gambled on position in football will always be running backs. You say, okay, there's a pool of money, not a wins or losings, but just the handle of money bet. Whatever money comes into the NFL, maybe somehow, the portions that go to certain players is based on, okay, if you were bet on, this many million, you get a kick out, stuff like that. Like, I think you have to get very, very, very creative to find a solution, because I know this is a very long answer, but I don't see the NFL changing. It's a passing league, and running backs they're talented, they're awesome, they're fun. They are probably the most replaceable position in the sport. And to the how did we get here? It wasn't the nerds' fault. The NFL has figured this out a long time ago. They knew. Adrian Peterson got $14 million a year 12 years ago. It wasn't some dick on Twitter saying something. The NFL is a lot of smart people that figured this out.
That's a fascinating way to look at it, that the running backs are the most bet on position, and that could have some interesting. I would have never even considered it like that. And it's definitely true. Like, you think about it, to some extent, it really just it is the easiest prop to follow along with.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another reason I don't think it's going to get any better too is we've already seen this, but in college football. But the best athletes aren't playing running back anymore. They're playing wide receiver. So like it's you're not going to get as many of those top tier running backs coming into the league because they're just going to be playing wide receiver. Because why wouldn't you?
Kyle Brandt made a good point that if you're in really good shape and you're someone like maybe not a Derrick Henry who's legitimately like Von Miller size, but someone that could blend to be on the defensive side either. If you get to university and you think about, hey, maybe I have a chance of making the NFL. Would that be better suited at defensive end over running back? And it could like influence the positions that people look to play going forward. I would say no doubt that in the last couple of years, there's been a huge lean toward wanting to play more wide receiver and wanting to play more corner at the professional level.
Safety too. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, do you have any other questions, Luke? I just want to I know you got to get out of here, Brad. So I want to make sure you're spending your time.
The only other thing is, I mean, just because you're the best contract mind in Bears football is me and Steve were saying. So let's say Justin Fields has a good year. It's the kind of year that we think it is. It's that 8 to 9 wins, but he throws 3,800 yards, has another 800 yards rushing, maybe 25 touchdowns. You finish the year and you think, okay, Justin Fields is the guy. Do you think that the Bears try and get that deal done this year, or do you think they exercise like a 5th year and think, we'll give ourselves like another year before we have to really make that decision?
Yeah, a phenomenal question. I think a fascinating question. Phenomenal because that stat line is like the exact one I've been using where I think it's tough. Like 4,500 total yards would obviously be a great number. Let's say the touchdown interception ratio is good, all those things. I do think, and maybe I'm wrong, and of course, you want to get deals done early. The market's always going to grow at quarterback, but I think unless he has like a no-doubter, no-brainer stamp, I'm a dude, I'm a franchise quarterback, I do kind of lean towards you pick up the 5th-year option. You, of course, have the conversation. You talk to the agents, talk through things. But the thing is, like, quarterbacks don't take, like mid-tier deals. It doesn't really exist, right? So it's like,
Daniel
for me,
Jones.
Right. Daniel Jones is an example, but even him, like, I wouldn't pay him $40 million a year.
Exactly.
So I think you pick up the 5th-year option, and I think you definitely entertain it. You see how it goes.
You see what he's looking for.
Right. Don't rule it out, but I wouldn't be surprised if they say, you know what, you were very good. You're not. Look, we're not going to draft a quarterback. We're not going to trade. We're not going to. It's your team. It's your thing.
Yep.
But give us one more year, and then you'll become the highest paid quarterback in NFL history.
Right. I heard rumblings that there could be another quarterback deal getting done this week too. Have you heard anything on the Justin Herbert front?
I wouldn't be surprised if that one gets done pretty soon. Yeah.
Do you think that it's going to be the top money in the space? Because I know that maybe like the casual fan doesn't realize or maybe doesn't appreciate it as much, but I know that those in the know are saying like from every metric that you can measure, like Justin Herbert like deserves to be paid like one of the best quarterbacks in football. Do you think he tops the market?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you? Nice.
I like
that.
The next quarterback always tops it. He'll top it, and then Joe Burrow will top it right after.
Joe Burrow's going to get it.
Yep. Yep.
All right, cool, Brad. That's about the half-hour spot. Is that all we got from you?
Yes, I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, Brad. It was a lot of fun.
Yep.
All right.
Cheers, brother.
Man. All right. Well, thank you, Brad, for coming on. That was awesome. I love talking. I mean, I will say if there's one thing that, like, I consider myself a pretty knowledgeable Bears fan, especially an NFL fan, but contracts, not my thing. So it's really nice to get Brad on to discuss that because he just knows way more than I could ever pretend to know.
He's so dialed in. If you don't already follow him, he is such a good follow. He was talking about a lot of that, the running back stuff that happened today, and even doing a good job of like, refuting maybe some points that people made, like not really reading into it. Like he'll read the fine print. Like I think he is like a lawyer by trade. Like I think he is like very, very well versed in this space. So not only that, but he is a devout Bears fan and very, very active on Twitter. So if you don't already follow him, he is an absolute must follow.
For sure.
But yeah.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
We got Bears football, Bears report today. Like you were saying, we saw some photos of the boys showing up, and tomorrow and the day after we get our first practices. I think that it is closed to the public, and I'm not sure that it's full tackle, but by the weekend, we should be hearing reports about, the classic, this guy looks like he's in the best shape of his life.
Yep. We already got it. I think we got a best shape of his life already today. Larry Borum showed up looking pretty thin. Best shape of his life. Did
he? Best shape of his life.
I'm sure.
Larry Borum slightly disappointed. You could tell on Twitter he was a little bit disappointed when Darnell Wright was the choice in the first round.
That's true. He was. That is a very good point. So yeah, maybe that lit a fire under him. He got into shape a little bit. Maybe he's going to come in, show that he's earned that swing tackle job, and they don't need to go out and sign someone else. That would be an ideal scenario. I mean, I don't think Larry Borum's a starter, but if he can solidify a swing tackle, that's a very important position to swing tackle for a team. So yeah, solidify that. That'd be great.
It feels kind of like the Jaylon Johnson conversation where, if he's your starting tackle, maybe you don't feel so good about it. But if Larry Borum is your swing tackle, you should actually feel fairly good about that. He's got over 30 starts in the NFL. He hasn't been horrible at that position. Maybe there have been better starters in the NFL, but he's not going to be the guy that sinks your ship. If he's your worst lineman, that's not so bad. And I think he plugs right into that swing tackle role. I would say that if he somehow supplements Darnell Wright as a starter and he goes into the season as a starter, now that would be an issue. I think you kind of have to be disappointed in both of those people, but as the swing tackle, as the third best tackle on the team, I think you have to kind of feel good about that.
Yeah, and he's experienced at guard too. So, if he's a guy, if you do have an injury at guard and not tackle, you might squeeze him in there as well too. So that's really valuable to have a guy who can play 3-4 positions across the offensive line. So yeah, I'm really excited for this training camp. It seems like this is, more so than in years past, is a year where we have a lot of young guys on the roster who you're just excited to see develop. You mentioned it, Darnell Wright, obviously Justin Fields, the 2 young D tackles, the 2 young cornerbacks.
The corners, totally.
I just want to see DJ Moore. Obviously, DJ Moore's established guy, but I want to see Justin Fields under DJ Moore. I'm sure we'll get tons of videos, even though they really try to clamp down on that, but there'll be videos out there of it. So I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun.
No, yeah, it should be really interesting. I was going to say the competition level that the Bears have this summer it should be, I would say this year, especially on defense, more than a lot of years, it's really hard to pencil in exactly who the starter is going to be at a lot of positions. Maybe safeties, are going to be good. And if you're playing a lot of nickel, it'll probably be Edwards and Edmunds. But on the D line and who your starting corners are going to be, there's a lot of young athletic talent vying for those positions. Someone like a Terrell Smith, probably isn't penciled in as a starter right now, but he's been getting a lot of praise. So I think these training camp practices are going to be really important.
Yeah, and then it's also who's going to be the next Jack Sanborn. I mean, Jack Sanborn at this time last year, no one was talking about him.
Great point.
And then he was the talk of training camp. So who's going to be that undrafted free agent guy who makes some noise at least? He's not necessarily going to be a starter or even make the team, but that guy who makes it a difficult roster decision there at the end. So that's really that's always my thing. I just love finding that guy who's an undrafted free agent who might actually have a chance. So that's what I'm kind of looking out for.
Yeah, 100%. Even those late round picks, who's the Travis Bell? He's the guy another one that'll be really interesting to see what he looked like, because whether or not you're a fan of how he looked in college, and honestly, his tape is very exciting. He kind of plays that role of that slashing DN that, you have high hopes for, but there's a lot of guys like that, like Terrell Smith, who, we got late but haven't gotten a lot of praise. It should be really fun to watch come training camp. On top of that, too, being that we came last, we have that first waiver until the beginning of the year, and we still have money to spend. So a lot of these older guys that are coming up and showing in for their physicals now for some of these other teams, and there's going to be coming some veteran cuts here in the next few days that I think that you can expect the Bears to be pretty active around. Like Brad was saying, you can still probably expect to move at edge. It's more than likely going to be free agent at this point rather than trade. Just because at this point, if you were going to trade someone, you were probably going to trade them before you were asking them to come to camp and compete with the people that are there. But even then, the dominoes are going to keep falling. The Bears aren't done making moves, and especially if they do wait until the season to start paying some of that money, there is that $25 million that they still need to pay before the start of the season. I think, right? Is it before the end of the league year? Before the start of the season?
I think it was before the start of the season. That is one of the questions I wanted to ask Brad, but we didn't get around to that specifically. Yeah. But yeah, I think it is right before. I think it's before the start of the season they have to do it. But yeah, we'll see.
But yeah, exciting stuff. I mean, I don't think we don't need to carry on too much more. But Brad did a good job of banging through the things that we wanted to look at. I'm just looking at my notes here. We talked about Justin Fields. We talked about the pass rush. It was interesting to hear his take on the running back thing, man. Tying it to some sort of the amount of money staked on those positions in the betting world is so out there, but it's also so interesting because 5 years ago, it would never have been part of the conversation. And now it's so ingrained into the culture of football. You're watching a game and it'll show you the live odds in the bottom of the corner. Like, it's such a part of the product now that it wouldn't surprise me if somehow that started to relate to how people are compensated.
The NFL itself has adopted it. It used to be the NFL was trying to shy away from it, but now they fully embraced it. So I think that does open the door. That's really I never considered that. So that was really interesting.
Dude, and that's why it's so nice to have guys like Brad on.
Yeah. So it's like, that would be so interesting. And like that would be a case where you could be like, hey, I want to, bet some money on my favorite players because I want them to get what they deserve. I'm going to put an extra couple bucks on Justin Fields.
Justin Fields over.
So that'll be interesting. But yeah, I think we're pretty much. I mean, Brad did a great job, and we can keep this as a short podcast today. We're both on vacation.
Yeah,
so we both want to get back.
We did one last week, and nothing's really changed in the Bears world since then. But we had a chance to talk to Brad, and there were so many conversations around it that we wanted to get out. So we decided we'd jump on for him. But
and we'll be back next week.
Next week we'll actually have some fodder for some real Bears fire. By then, hopefully, everyone will have seen some highlights of Justin Fields and DJ Moore throwing passes on air, and we can go.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll definitely be back next week sometime, probably Tuesday or Wednesday. So we'll talk to everyone there. Before we go, this podcast was brought to you by 366 Golf. Make sure to I'll put the link in the bio, but make sure to go to 366.com. Use promo code CFC at checkout for 50% discount on all apparel. Thank you for 366 for sponsoring this video. And yeah, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, like, share. I'll be tweeting out this video soon with the link. So please retweet. We really appreciate everyone's support. It really makes it awesome to do this and get better guests on like Brad. So hopefully we can do that again. So thanks everyone, and we'll talk to everyone next week. Bear down.
Bear down.